The door slammed open. A Aurelian's bare feet slid backward on marble so cold it burned. Three men in black suits filled the doorway like a wall of muscle and expensive cologne. Behind them, the winter air bit through his thin white shirt, raising goosebumps across his arms. He couldn't scream. He never could. His stepfather's voice cut through the silence, "Take him." The words landed like a fist to the stomach. Aurelian's blue eyes darted to the man who'd raised him for 10 years, the man who was supposed to protect him, but there was no regret in that face, only relief. "You said you had collateral." The enforcer's voice was gravel and smoke. Tattoos crawled up his neck, disappearing into his collar. "Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is." Aurelian's stepfather pointed, not at furniture, not at jewelry, at him. The enforcer studied Aurelian like he was counting inventory. 20 years old, mute, omega, blonde hair that fell into terrified eyes, hands that shook so hard he had to press them against his thighs to hide it. "This covers your debt." The enforcer's laugh was sharp. "You're joking." "He's pure bloodline, registered omega, never been claimed." The stepfather's voice climbed higher with each word, desperate and pathetic. "He's worth more than what I owe." Aurelian's throat closed. He wanted to run, wanted to speak, wanted to do anything except stand there while men discussed his value like he was livestock. The enforcer circled him once, twice. His boots clicked against the floor in a rhythm that made Aurelian's heart race. Then he stopped directly in front of him, close enough that Aurelian could smell leather and gunpowder. "Does he understand what's happening?" Aurelian nodded, once small. "Good." The enforcer grabbed his arm, not violent but firm enough to prove ownership had already transferred. "Then he knows this isn't personal." It was personal to Aurelian. His stepfather turned away before they even left the room. No goodbye, no apology, just the sound of a door closing and locks sliding into place. Outside, a black car waited with tinted windows and an engine that purred like a predator. They pushed him into the backseat. The leather was soft, the space was warm, somehow that made everything worse. Aurelian pressed himself against the door and stared at his reflection in the window. His face looked pale, small, forgettable. The enforcer slid into the front seat and made a call. "We have the Omega, bringing him to Kael now." "Kael." Aurelian didn't know the name, but he heard the way it was spoken, with fear wrapped in respect. The drive took 30 minutes through streets he didn't recognize. They passed buildings that grew taller and sleeker, neighborhoods where even the streetlights looked expensive. This wasn't the part of the city where people like him existed. The car stopped in front of a building made entirely of black glass. Security cameras tracked their movement from every angle. Men in identical suits stood at the entrance, hands resting near concealed weapons. They pulled Aurelian out and walked him through a lobby that smelled like leather and money. His bare feet made no sound on the polished floor. Elevator, 60 floors up, silence except for the hum of machinery and his own shallow breathing. The doors opened into an office. And that's when Aurelian saw him. Dominic Kael sat behind a desk made of dark wood and sharp angles. Black suit, black hair, tattoos that curved along his collarbone and disappeared beneath his collar, marks that looked like they'd been earned, not chosen. His presence filled the room without him moving, without him speaking. An alpha. Not just any alpha. The kind that made other alphas lower their eyes. The enforcer shoved Aurelian forward, payment for the rig's debt. Dominic didn't look up from the papers in front of him. His pen moved across the page in smooth, controlled strokes. 10 seconds passed, 20, the silence stretched so long it became its own form of violence. Finally, Dominic set the pen down. He looked at Aurelian. Not the way the others had, like he was counting value, but like he was reading a story written in scars and survival. "You're mute," Dominic said. It wasn't a question. Aurelian nodded. "You didn't betray me." Another nod. The men behind him laughed. "Doesn't matter, debt's a debt." Dominic leaned forward, elbows on the desk. His dark eyes never left Aurelian's face. "Then he's not payment." The room went still. "He's my responsibility now." But this wasn't where his punishment ended. What do you think Dominic's real intentions are? Drop your theories below. Aurelian expected a cell. He got a bedroom. The door clicked shut behind him, but there was no lock, no chain, just silence and a space 3 times larger than anywhere he'd ever slept. A bed with clean white sheets, a bathroom with running water, windows that overlooked the city like it was something to own instead of survive. He stood in the center of the room and waited for the trap to reveal itself. Nothing happened. An hour passed, then 2, his legs ached from standing, but sitting felt like surrender, like acceptance. A knock broke the silence. Aurelian's heart slammed against his ribs. The door opened. A woman in her 50s stepped inside carrying folded clothes and a tray of food. She didn't smile, but she didn't sneer either. Neutral, professional. "Mr. Kael wants you comfortable," she set everything on the bed. "Showers through there, food's hot, eat." She left before he could try to gesture a thank you. Aurelian stared at the food, real food, not scraps, and his stomach twisted. This was wrong. Kindness from a mafia boss made no sense. Punishment was supposed to hurt. Captivity was supposed to feel like captivity. This felt like waiting. He forced himself to eat 3 bites, then stopped. His hands shook too much to hold the fork steady. The shower was worse. Hot water, soap that smelled clean instead of chemical. A mirror that showed him exactly how scared he looked, blue eyes too wide, hair sticking to his forehead, bruises on his arm from where the enforcer had grabbed him. He was still staring at his reflection when the bathroom door opened. Dominic stood in the doorway. Aurelian's breath stopped. He grabbed a towel and pressed it against his chest like it could protect him from whatever came next. But Dominic didn't step inside, didn't move at all. "I'm not going to touch you." His voice was calm, even, "but we need to establish rules." Aurelian nodded, because what else could he do? "You stay in this room unless I call for you, you don't speak to my men, you don't leave this floor." Dominic's gaze was steady, unreadable. "And you don't assume you understand what's happening here." Aurelian wanted to ask why, wanted to know what responsibility meant in a world where people were traded like currency. Dominic turned to leave, then paused. "Your stepfather lied about a lot of things, but he was right about one." Aurelian's pulse hammered in his throat. "You are valuable." The door closed. Aurelian slid down the wall and pulled his knees to his chest. Valuable, the word should have been a compliment, instead it felt like a death sentence. Days blurred together. Dominic never touched him, never raised his voice. But his presence was everywhere, in the schedules Aurelian had to follow, the clothes that appeared in his closet, the way other men watched him when he walked past. He learned quickly that Dominic Kael wasn't just feared. He was worshipped. Every person in this building moved like they were part of a machine designed to serve one man. Orders were followed without question. Mistakes were corrected without mercy. And Aurelian was the only thing in this place that didn't have a function. A weekend he saw Dominic again. The Alpha was in his office, door open, talking to 2 men in suits who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Aurelian walked past slowly, careful not to make noise. Dominic's eyes tracked him anyway. That night Aurelian was summoned. The woman knocked and gestured for him to follow. They walked through hallways lined with artwork that probably cost more than Aurelian's entire life, down another elevator, into a private dining room where Dominic sat alone at a table set for 2. "Sit," Dominic said. Aurelian sat. Food appeared, prepared by someone Aurelian never saw, expensive, perfectly plated. Dominic ate in silence. Aurelian pretended to. "You're afraid of me," Dominic said finally. Aurelian didn't deny it. "Good, fear keeps people alive." Dominic set his fork down and leaned back. "But you're not afraid of the right things." Aurelian's brow furrowed. "You think I'm going to hurt you?" Dominic's voice dropped lower. "I'm not, but the people who want you, they will." The words landed like stones in Aurelian's stomach. "You're not here because of your stepfather's debt. You're here because letting you go would be the same as killing you." Aurelian's hands clenched in his lap. Dominic stood and walked to the window. City lights reflected off the glass, turning his silhouette into something sharp and untouchable. "There are 5 syndicates in this city. 3 of them know about you now, and they're very interested in what makes an Omega worth more than money." Aurelian felt the room tilt. "So here's the reality," Dominic turned and his expression was ice. You belong to me now, not because I want to own you, but because it's the only way to keep you breathing. And that single sentence made him more dangerous than a prisoner. Do you think Dominic is protecting him or trapping him? Comment your thoughts. Aurelian stopped counting days. Time in Dominic's world worked differently, measured in scheduled meals, escorted walks, and the constant hum of danger just outside his door. He was given freedom within limits, a gilded cage with room to pace. But packing didn't make him feel less trapped. He learned the rhythm of the building. Morning meant silence. Afternoon meant voices in distant rooms, meetings, arguments, decisions made in languages Aurelian didn't speak. Evening meant Dominic returned and the entire floor shifted to accommodate him. Aurelian was invisible until he wasn't. One afternoon, he walked past the common area where Dominic's men gathered. They stopped talking the second they saw him. Eyes tracked his movement like predators watching prey decide whether to run. He kept walking. That's the Omega. Kael's pet project. Looks breakable. Laughter followed him down the hall. Aurelian's chest tightened. He wanted to disappear into the walls, wanted to scream that he hadn't asked for any of this, but his voice had been stolen years ago and anger without sound was just pain turned inward. He made it back to his room and locked the door. The knock came an hour later. Dominic didn't wait for permission. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, and suddenly the room felt too small. They disrespected you. Aurelian blinked. He hadn't expected Dominic to know, hadn't expected him to care. It won't happen again. The promise was delivered like a threat, and Aurelian didn't doubt it. Dominic crossed the room and stood near the window, arms folded. You need to understand something. In this world, perception is survival. If they see you as weak, they'll test you. If they see you as mine, they'll fear you. Aurelian's pulse quickened. So we're going to make it clear. The next day, Aurelian was summoned to a meeting. Not a private dinner, a real meeting. 10 men in suits sitting around a conference table, folders open, stakes high. Aurelian was told to sit in the corner, out of the way, silent. But he wasn't ignored. Every man in that room glanced at him at least once, some with curiosity, some with calculation, one with something that made Aurelian's skin crawl. Dominic ran the meeting like a conductor leading an orchestra. His voice never rose, but every word carried weight. Decisions were made in minutes. Arguments were shut down with a look. Halfway through, the man who'd been starring too long spoke up. You keeping pets now, Kael? The room went still. Dominic didn't look at the man. He kept his eyes on the papers in front of him. Repeat that. The man's smile faltered. I'm just saying. You're just leaving. Dominic's tone didn't change, permanently. 2 guards appeared from nowhere. The man was escorted out before he could finish his sentence. No one else spoke for the rest of the meeting. When it ended, Dominic gestured for Aurelian to follow him. They walked in silence back to the office. Dominic poured himself a drink, amber liquid in a crystal glass, and stood by the window. Do you understand what just happened? Aurelian nodded slowly. Good, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. Aurelian's stomach dropped. Dominic turned to face him. There's a rumor spreading. People are talking about you, wondering why I'd keep an Omega who can't speak, can't work, can't contribute. Aurelian's hands curled into fists. They think you're a weakness, a distraction. Dominic took a slow sip of his drink, and in this business, weakness gets exploited. Aurelian wanted to ask what that meant, wanted to know if Dominic regretted taking him in. But Dominic set the glass down and walked closer, close enough that Aurelian had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. Let them talk, let them wonder. Dominic's voice dropped to something quieter, almost dangerous. Because the second they try to touch you, they'll learn exactly what I'm willing to do. Aurelian's breath caught. This wasn't protection. This was possession wrapped in restraint. And he didn't know which terrified him more. Then the outside world found him. Is Dominic's control keeping Aurelian safe or making him a target? Tell us what you think. The video went live at 3 in the morning. Aurelian didn't know until breakfast, when the woman who brought his food looked at him differently. Pity mixed with something worse, embarrassment. She left without speaking. Aurelian's hands shook as he picked up the tablet she'd left behind. The screen was already open to a news site. The headline made his stomach turn. Mafia boss Kael's latest acquisition, Mute Omega delivered as debt payment. Below it a video. Grainy footage from a security camera, Aurelian being pulled from the car, stumbling barefoot across the pavement, looking small and terrified as men twice his size escorted him into the building. The comments were worse. Asterisk punishment Omega, that's all he is. Can't even speak for himself, pathetic. Kael's standards are slipping. How much you think he's worth? I'd pay to see what a mute Omega sounds like when. Aurelian dropped the tablet. His vision blurred, his chest tightened until breathing felt impossible. He pressed his hands over his ears even though the cruelty wasn't a sound, it was words burned into his brain. He wasn't a person to them. He was a transaction, a punchline, a thing. The door opened. Dominic stepped inside and the air in the room shifted. His expression was unreadable but his eyes were sharp enough to cut. You saw it. Aurelian nodded, he couldn't look at him. Dominic crossed the room in 3 strides and crouched in front of him, not towering, not commanding, just there. Look at me. Aurelian forced himself to meet Dominic's gaze. This is what they do, they find your weakness and they weaponize it. Dominic's voice was steady but there was something underneath it, anger tightly leashed. They want you to break. Aurelian's throat burned with words he couldn't say. But you don't get to break, not here, not while you're mine. Mine. The word should have felt like a collar, instead, it felt like the only thing holding him together. Dominic stood and pulled out his phone, he made a call, short, clipped. Find the source, shut it down, and make sure whoever leaked it understands what happens when they touch my property. He ended the call and looked at Aurelian. Stay in this room today, don't go near the windows, don't speak to anyone. Aurelian nodded. Dominic left. The hours crawled. Aurelian sat on the floor with his back against the bed, staring at nothing. His mind replayed the comments over and over until they became a mantra of worthlessness. He stopped eating. Stopped drinking water. Stopped caring whether the door opened or stayed closed. By nightfall, his body was shaking, not from cold, from the weight of existing in a world that hated him for things he couldn't control. The door opened again. Dominic stepped inside and this time he wasn't alone. A man in a white coat followed, a doctor, Aurelian realized. I'm fine, Aurelian tried to gesture but his hands were too weak to form the signs properly. You're not, Dominic's voice was flat, and you're going to let him check you. The doctor worked quickly, blood pressure, heart rate, hydration levels. He asked questions Aurelian answered with nods and head shakes. Finally the doctor stood. Acute stress response, dehydration, malnutrition if this continues. It won't, Dominic said. The doctor left. Dominic stayed. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Aurelian like he was trying to solve a problem with no clear answer. You think silence makes you invisible? Dominic's tone was quieter now. It doesn't, it makes you a mirror. People see what they want to see and right now they see something they can break. Aurelian's eyes burned. So stop letting them. The words were a command, a challenge. And Aurelian had no idea how to follow them. And his body was about to pay the price. Can Aurelian survive in a world that sees him as broken? Drop your answer below. Aurelian collapsed in the hallway. 1 second he was walking toward the bathroom, the next his legs gave out and the floor rushed up to meet him. His vision went black at the edges, sound fading into a dull roar. Somewhere distant, someone shouted. Hands grabbed him firm but not rough and lifted him like he weighed nothing. The world tilted, voices overlapped. Get Kael now. Medical wing, move. Aurelian tried to speak, to gesture that he was fine but his body wouldn't cooperate. His heart hammered irregularly, skipping beats, racing then slowing in a rhythm that felt wrong. He was placed on something soft. Bright lights burned through his closed eyelids, machines beeped, voices spoke in medical terms he didn't understand. Then one voice cut through the rest. What happened? Dominic. Acute arrhythmia, his heart's under extreme stress, likely caused by prolonged malnutrition and psychological trauma. If he'd been alone another hour. The doctor didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Aurelian forced his eyes open. The room was too bright, too white. Dominic stood at the foot of the bed, hands braced on the metal frame. His expression was controlled, but something underneath it was fracturing. "Fix it," Dominic said. "Mr. Kael, this isn't something I can fix with medication. His body is shutting down because his mind has given up." "Silence." Dominic's jaw tightened, then make him want to survive. The doctor looked uncomfortable. "That's not how." "I don't care how, figure it out." The doctor left. Dominic stayed. He pulled a chair close to the bed and sat. For a long time he didn't speak, just stared at Aurelian like he was something fragile that had been placed in his hands against his will. Finally Dominic leaned forward. "You're not dying on me." Aurelian blinked slowly. "You hear me? You don't get to quit, not because the world's cruel, not because people are vicious, not because you think you don't matter." Aurelian's throat tightened. "You matter to me." The words landed like an anchor. Dominic reached out and placed his hand over Aurelian's, not grabbing, just resting there, warm, steady. "I know what it's like to be treated like you're disposable, to have people look at you and see nothing worth saving." Dominic's voice was low, almost rough. "But you're not disposable, and you're not nothing." Aurelian's eyes burned, tears slipped down his temples before he could stop them. "So you're going to eat, you're going to rest, and you're going to let me figure out how to keep you alive long enough to see that you're stronger than they think." Aurelian wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that survival was possible. But belief required hope, and hope had been beaten out of him a long time ago. The doctor returned with IV fluids and medication. Dominic didn't leave. He stayed through every needle stick, every monitor adjustment, every whispered conversation between medical staff. Hours passed. Aurelian drifted in and out of consciousness. Every time he woke, Dominic was there, reading reports, making calls, handling business without leaving the room. At some point, Aurelian's heart rhythm stabilized. The doctor checked his vitals one last time. He'll need constant monitoring for the next 72 hours, and he needs to eat real food regularly. Dominic nodded. When the doctor left, Dominic stood and walked to the window. He stared out at the city lights for a long time. "There's something you need to know." His voice was careful, measured. Aurelian's pulse quickened. Dominic turned. The medical scans showed more than just stress damage. Aurelian waited. "You're a carrier omega." The words didn't register at first. Then they did. Carrier omegas were rare, genetically compatible with high-level alphas in ways that made bonding more stable, offspring stronger. In civilian life, it was a medical footnote. In the Mafia world, it was a death sentence. Aurelian's breath quickened. "The syndicates already wanted you because you're connected to me, but now," Dominic's expression darkened, "now you're worth more than territory, more than alliances." Aurelian's hands clenched the sheets. "So we're changing the rules. You're not leaving this building, you're not going near windows, and anyone who even looks at you wrong is gone." Aurelian wanted to argue, wanted to say this was too much. But deep down he knew Dominic was right. He wasn't just a captive anymore. He was a target. But the scans revealed something far worse. "What do you think happens when the syndicates find out?" Comment below. The boardroom door exploded inward. Glass shattered across polished wood as three masked figures stormed through. Gunshots cracked the air, sharp, deafening. Men in suits dove for cover. Chairs toppled, papers scattered like frightened birds. Aurelian froze. He'd been sitting in the corner, invisible as always, while Dominic conducted business with 7 syndicate heads. A negotiation, a treaty signing, something that was supposed to be safe. It wasn't. One of the masked figures spotted him immediately, eyes locked, gun raised. Dominic moved faster. He crossed the room in 3 strides and slammed Aurelian to the ground, covering him with his own body. Bullets tore through the air where Aurelian's head had been seconds before. The weight of Dominic pressed down, solid, protective, suffocating. "Stay down," Dominic growled against his ear. Aurelian couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His heart slammed against his ribs so hard it hurt. Dominic's men returned fire. The sound was chaos, metal against metal, shouting, bodies hitting the floor. One of the attackers fell, then another. The third one ran. Dominic didn't move until the room went silent except for the ringing in everyone's ears. He pulled back slowly, eyes scanning Aurelian for injuries. "You hit." Aurelian shook his head, but his hands were shaking too hard to sign properly. Dominic stood and hauled Aurelian to his feet. His expression was ice, but his grip was careful. "Get him to the medical wing, now." Two guards appeared and escorted Aurelian out before he could protest. The hallway was a blur. Voices overlapped. Someone barked orders into a radio. Aurelian's legs barely worked, but the guards kept him upright until they reached the medical wing and deposited him on a bed. A nurse checked him over, pulse, pupils, breathing. "He's in shock, but he's not hurt." Aurelian wanted to laugh. "Not hurt?" As if fear didn't leave wounds. The nurse left him alone in the sterile white room. Minutes stretched into an hour. Aurelian stared at the ceiling and tried to stop shaking. The door opened. Dominic stepped inside and Aurelian's breath caught. There was blood on Dominic's collar, not his own. Aurelian could tell by the way he moved, controlled and uninjured, but the sight of it made everything real in a way the attack hadn't. "They knew you'd be there," Dominic said quietly. Aurelian's stomach dropped. "This wasn't about the meeting, it was about you." Dominic crossed the room and stopped at the foot of the bed. "They wanted to take you, alive." Aurelian's throat closed. Dominic pulled out his phone and opened a file. He turned the screen toward Aurelian. "This is what they're calling you in their networks." The document was in coded language, but certain words stood out. Carrier Omega, Kael's weakness, high-value target. And a number. $5 billion. Aurelian's vision blurred. "That's what you're worth to them." Dominic's voice was flat. "Not as a person, as a commodity, a bargaining chip, a way to control me." Aurelian wanted to say he was sorry, wanted to apologize for being the reason Dominic's life was in danger. But Dominic sat on the edge of the bed and looked at him with something that wasn't anger. It was resolve. "They think taking you will break me, they're wrong." Dominic's jaw tightened. "But they're going to keep trying, and next time I might not be fast enough." Aurelian's chest ached. "So we're changing the game." Dominic stood. "No more meetings with you present, no more public exposure. You stay locked down until I've eliminated every threat." Aurelian nodded because what choice did he have? Dominic walked toward the door then stopped. He didn't turn around. "You should know something." Aurelian waited. "When I saw that gun pointed at you, I didn't think about strategy, I didn't think about alliances or consequences." Dominic's voice dropped. "I just moved." The door closed behind him. Aurelian pressed his hands over his face and tried not to fall apart. He wasn't just a target now. He was the reason people were dying. And they didn't wait long to strike. Do you think Aurelian is safer with Dominic, or would he be better off running? Let us know in the comments. The second attack came at midnight. Alarms screamed through the building. Red emergency lights bathed the hallways in crimson. Aurelian jerked awake, heart already racing before his mind caught up. The door to his room slammed open. Dominic stood there in a black tactical vest, gun in hand. "Move now." Aurelian stumbled out of bed. No shoes, no time. Dominic grabbed his wrist and pulled him into the hallway. The building shook, an explosion somewhere below, dust rained from the ceiling, smoke curled up the stairwell. "They breached the lower floors," Dominic said, voice clipped. "We're going to the roof." Aurelian's legs barely worked, but Dominic didn't let go. They ran through corridors Aurelian had never seen, past rooms filled with monitors and weapons, through reinforced doors that hissed open and locked behind them. Gunfire echoed from below. Closer now. Dominic's men appeared at every intersection, creating a moving barrier around them. Orders were shouted. Positions were called out. Someone screamed. They reached the stairwell to the roof. Dominic pushed Aurelian ahead of him. "Climb, don't stop." Aurelian climbed. His bare feet slipped on the metal stairs, his lungs burned. Behind him, Dominic fired 3 shots down the stairwell. Someone cried out, someone fell. They burst through the roof access door into cold night air. A helicopter waited, rotors already spinning. Dominic shoved Aurelian toward it. Get in. Aurelian stumbled forward and froze. Three men stepped out from behind the helicopter, not Dominic's men. Enemies. One of them smiled, told you he'd bring the Omega straight to us. Dominic's expression went dead calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence. He raised his gun. The men raised theirs. Stand off. Aurelian's heart stopped. Then Dominic did something that made no sense. He stepped in front of Aurelian. Completely. Blocking him with his own body. You want him, Dominic's voice was ice, you go through me first. One of the men laughed, you die for an Omega who can't even speak. Try me. The air went still. Then everything happened at once. The helicopter pilot, one of Dominic's men, opened fire from the cockpit. Two of the attackers went down. The third lunged toward Aurelian. Dominic intercepted him. They collided hard, the attacker's gun went flying. Dominic slammed him to the ground, fist connecting with his jaw once, twice, until the man stopped moving. But there were more. Footsteps pounded up the stairwell. Dominic grabbed Aurelian and hauled him into the helicopter. Goes now. The pilot didn't hesitate. The helicopter lifted off just as four more attackers burst onto the roof. Bullets hit the side of the helicopter, metal pinging, glass cracking. Aurelian pressed himself against the seat, eyes wide. Dominic sat across from him, chest heaving, blood on his knuckles, not his blood. They flew in silence for 10 minutes before the pilot spoke. Safe house is 15 minutes out. Dominic nodded. Then he looked at Aurelian. Really looked at him. And something in his expression cracked. He reached across the space between them and pulled Aurelian into his arms, not rough, not demanding. Desperate. Aurelian stiffened, then slowly relaxed. His face pressed against Dominic's chest. He could feel the Alpha's heartbeat, fast, uneven, alive. I thought I'd lost you, Dominic said, so quiet Aurelian almost didn't hear it over the rotors. Aurelian's hands curled into Dominic's vest. They stayed like that until the helicopter touched down. The safe house was a concrete fortress buried in the woods. No windows, no neighbors, just steel doors and armed guards. Dominic led Aurelian inside and down a hallway into a small bedroom, plain, functional. Stay here, don't open the door for anyone but me. Aurelian nodded. Dominic turned to leave. Aurelian grabbed his wrist. Dominic stopped. Aurelian's hands shook as he signed slowly, carefully, thank you. Dominic's jaw tightened. He reached up and cupped Aurelian's face with one hand, gentle, almost reverent. I'm not losing you, he said, not to them, not to anyone. Then he leaned down and kissed Aurelian's forehead. It wasn't passion. It was a promise. When Dominic left, Aurelian sank to the floor and pressed his fingers to where Dominic's lips had been. For the first time in his life, someone had chosen to protect him. Not because he was valuable, but because he mattered. That single moment changed the rules forever. What do you think will happen now that Dominic has shown his true feelings? Drop your thoughts below. The name came through on a secure line. Dominic stood in the control room of the safe house, phone pressed to his ear, listening to his head of intelligence deliver information that made his blood run cold. We trace the breach, the attacks, the leaked footage. A pause. It all goes back to one source. Who? Marcus Riggs. Dominic's grip tightened on the phone. Aurelian's stepfather. Yes, but he's not working alone. He sold information about carrier Omegas to 4 different syndicates, turned it into an auction. Aurelian wasn't the only one. Dominic's vision went red. How many? 7 over the past 3 years, all of them disappeared into trafficking networks. Dominic ended the call. He stood in the silence of the control room and let rage settle into something colder, more dangerous. Marcus Riggs had sold his own stepson. And he'd done it before. To other Omegas. Other families. Dominic made 3 calls. The first was to his legal team. I want every financial record, every communication, every transaction Marcus Riggs has made in the past 5 years, and I want it delivered to the federal task force by morning. The second was to his enforcement division. Find him, I don't care where he's hiding, bring him to me. The third was to his allies in law enforcement. I'm handing you a trafficker, but I get 10 minutes with him first. By dawn, Marcus Riggs was located. A luxury apartment in the financial district, paid for with blood money. Dominic's men surrounded the building, no escape, no negotiation. They dragged Marcus out in handcuffs, still in his bathrobe, screaming about rights and lawyers and misunderstandings. Dominic was waiting in the basement of one of his properties. When Marcus was brought in, he went pale. Kael, listen, this is a mistake, I can explain. Explain how you sold 7 Omegas into trafficking rings. Dominic's voice was calm, dead calm. Marcus's mouth opened and closed. I didn't. Explain how you gave your stepson to me as payment, knowing exactly what syndicates would do to get him back. Marcus stumbled over his words. He wasn't even mine. His mother married me and then died, and I was stuck with. Dominic moved so fast Marcus didn't see it coming. One punch, precise, brutal. Marcus hit the floor, blood pouring from his nose. You're not human, Dominic said quietly. You're a parasite. Marcus tried to crawl backward. You can't do this, I'll talk. I'll tell the feds everything about you. Go ahead, Dominic crouched down to his level. Because in about 30 minutes you're going to be in federal custody, and I've already made sure they know exactly what you've done. Marcus's face went white. Omega trafficking carries a mandatory life sentence, no parole, and the people you sold those Omegas to, Dominic's smile was sharp. They don't like snitches, so you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell watching your back, waiting for one of them to get to you. Marcus started crying. Dominic stood, get him out of here. The guards dragged Marcus away. Dominic walked back to his car and drove to the safe house in silence. When he arrived, Aurelian was sitting by the window, staring out at the trees. Dominic sat beside him. It's done, he said quietly. Aurelian looked at him, question clear in his eyes. Your stepfather's been arrested, he'll never touch you again, he'll never touch anyone again. Aurelian's breath caught. Dominic reached out and took his hand. And the syndicates that wanted you, I've made it clear that taking you means war, total war, they're backing off. Aurelian's eyes filled with tears. You're safe now. But Aurelian shook his head. He pulled his hand free and signed quickly, frantically. You're not safe because of me. Dominic's expression softened. I knew the risks when I claimed you. I didn't ask you to. I know, Dominic's voice was steady, but I'd do it again. Aurelian's hands shook as he signed the next words. Why? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he answered. Because when I look at you, I don't see a transaction, I don't see a liability. I see someone who survived when the world tried to break him, someone who kept going even when silence was the only option. Aurelian's tears spilled over. And because, Dominic hesitated, because you remind me that power means nothing if you have no one to protect. Aurelian stared at him. Dominic stood, rest, we're moving back to the main building tomorrow, it's been fortified, you'll be safe. He walked toward the door. Aurelian's hands moved before he could stop them. What if I don't want to just be safe? Dominic stopped. Aurelian stood, heart pounding. What if I want to stay because I choose to, not because you're protecting me, but because... He couldn't finish. Dominic turned slowly, his eyes searched Aurelian's face. Say it. Aurelian's hands trembled. Because I don't want to be anywhere you're not. The room went still. Dominic crossed the space between them in 2 strides. He cupped Aurelian's face with both hands, tilting his head up. Then stay. And that arrogance sealed his fate. Will Aurelian and Dominic finally find peace, or is there more danger ahead? Comment what you think happens next. Aurelian woke to silence. Not the comfortable kind, the wrong kind. He sat up slowly, scanning the room. Everything looked the same, bed, chair, door. But something felt off. He stood and walked to the door, locked from the outside. His pulse quickened. He knocked, no answer. He knocked harder. Finally, footsteps approached, the door opened, one of Dominic's guards stood there, expression neutral. Aurelian signed quickly, where is Dominic? He's in a meeting, you're to stay here until he returns. Aurelian's chest tightened, why am I locked in? For your safety. The guard closed the door before Aurelian could argue. Locked in. For his safety. The words echoed in Aurelian's head, twisting into something ugly. He paced the room, anxiety building with every step. An hour passed, then two. Finally, the door opened again. A different guard, older, less neutral. "Come with me." Aurelian followed him down the hallway, heart pounding. They didn't go toward Dominic's office. They went deeper into the building, toward sections Aurelian had never seen. They stopped outside a conference room. Voices inside, low, tense. The guard gestured for Aurelian to wait. Through the crack in the door, Aurelian saw Dominic standing at the head of a table, surrounded by men in suits. "The only option," one of them said, "if the syndicates think he's dead, they'll stop looking." Dominic's jaw was tight, and what happens to him? Relocation, new identity, witness protection if necessary. "You're asking me to erase him. We're asking you to keep him alive." Aurelian's blood went cold. They were planning to fake his death. To send him away. To make him disappear. "He'll be safe," another voice said. "Safer than he's ever been, but it means cutting all ties, no contact, no visits. He becomes a ghost." Dominic's hands braced on the table. "And if I say no? Then you're gambling with his life, and eventually you'll lose." Silence. Aurelian stepped back from the door, heart hammering so hard it hurt. Dominic was going to let him go. Not because he didn't care, but because he thought it was the only way to protect him. Aurelian turned and walked back the way he'd come. The guard didn't stop him. He made it to his room and closed the door, pressed his back against it, slid to the floor. For the first time since arriving at Dominic's building, Aurelian felt more alone than he had in his stepfather's house. Because being discarded by someone who hated him was expected. Being discarded by someone who cared. That was a different kind of destruction. Hours passed. Aurelian sat on the floor and stared at the wall. His mind replayed every moment with Dominic, every careful touch, every protective word. It had all been temporary. A stopgap solution until something better came along. The door opened. Dominic stepped inside and froze when he saw Aurelian on the floor. "What's wrong?" Aurelian didn't move, didn't sign. Dominic crouched in front of him. "Talk to me." Aurelian's hands moved slowly, deliberately. "I heard you." Dominic's expression shifted, understanding, regret. "Aurelian, you're sending me away." "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" Dominic exhaled slowly. "It's the only way to guarantee you'll survive. The syndicates will never stop hunting you if they think you're with me, but if they believe you're dead, then I lose everything. You'll be alive." Alive and alone. Aurelian's hands shook again. Dominic reached for him, but Aurelian pulled back. "You said I mattered to you. You said you weren't losing me." "I'm not. I'm keeping you safe. By erasing me. By giving you a chance at a real life." Aurelian laughed, a broken, silent sound. He stood, putting distance between them. "You don't get to decide what my life looks like." "Then what do you want?" Dominic's voice rose. "You want to stay here and wait for the next attack, wait for the day I'm not fast enough and you die because of me. I want you to stop treating me like I'm something you have to save." The words hung in the air. Dominic stared at him. "You don't understand what you're asking." "I understand that you're about to make the same choice everyone else has made, to decide I'm too much trouble, too much risk." "That's not." "It is." Aurelian's eyes burned. "And I'm tired of people choosing for me." Dominic's hands clenched into fists. "What do you want me to say? That I'm terrified of losing you? That every time you're in danger it feels like my chest is being ripped open? That I can't think straight when you're hurt?" Aurelian went still. "Because I'm terrified, and I don't know how to protect you without pushing you away." The room went silent. Aurelian's hands moved slowly. "Then stop trying to protect me." Dominic's brow furrowed. "Start trusting me to survive." And then he did something no one believed was possible. "Do you think Dominic will let Aurelian stay, or will he send him away for his own safety? Share your predictions below." Aurelian's voice came out broken. Cracked. Barely audible. But it was there. "Stay." The single word shattered the silence like glass breaking in an empty room. Dominic went completely still, his eyes widened. For the first time since Aurelian had known him, the Alpha looked stunned. "You." Dominic's voice failed. He took a step forward. "Say it again." Aurelian's throat burned. Years of silence had left his vocal cords weak, unpracticed. Every syllable felt like dragging stones across gravel. But he forced the words out anyway. I want to stay. Dominic closed the distance between them and pulled Aurelian into his arms, not rough, not controlled. Shaking. You spoke, Dominic whispered against Aurelian's hair. You actually spoke. Aurelian's hands curled into Dominic's shirt. His voice was raw when he tried again. Don't send me away. Dominic pulled back just enough to look at him. His eyes were glassy. I won't, I swear to you I won't. Aurelian's legs gave out. Dominic caught him and lowered them both to the floor, holding Aurelian like he was something precious that might slip away if he let go. I'm sorry, Dominic said quietly. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought keeping you alive meant letting you go, but I was wrong. Aurelian rested his forehead against Dominic's chest. I'm tired of being afraid. Then we stop running, Dominic's voice steadied. We stop hiding, we make it clear to everyone that you're not a target, you're not a weakness. Aurelian looked up at him, question in his eyes. You're mine, Dominic said, publicly, officially, and anyone who touches you answers to me. Over the next 2 weeks, Dominic made good on his promise. Marcus Riggs was sentenced to life in federal prison. The trial was public. The evidence was damning. Omega trafficking, conspiracy, fraud, every crime laid bare for the world to see. Aurelian didn't attend the trial. He didn't need to. Knowing it was over was enough. The syndicates that had hunted him received a different kind of message. Dominic didn't negotiate, he didn't threaten. He acted. 3 syndicate leaders were arrested within a week, their networks dismantled, their operations exposed. The rest backed off. Because going after Aurelian now meant going to war with Dominic Kael, and no one was willing to pay that price. Aurelian started speaking more. Not fluently, not easily. But enough. Enough to say thank you when someone brought him food, enough to tell Dominic when he was tired, enough to whisper good morning when the alpha checked on him before meetings. His voice was soft, hesitant. But it was his. One evening, Dominic brought Aurelian to his private office. The city stretched out beyond the windows, lights glittering like scattered stars. I need to tell you something, Dominic said. Aurelian sat on the couch, hands folded in his lap. Dominic sat beside him. The world knows about you now, they know you're with me, they know you're a carrier Omega. Aurelian tensed. But they also know that you're protected, that you're not for sale, that you're not a commodity. Dominic reached out and took Aurelian's hand, and I want to make sure it stays that way. Aurelian's pulse quickened. Dominic pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, simple silver, no diamonds, no flash. Just a band with an engraving on the inside. Chosen. I'm not asking you to bond with me, Dominic said carefully. Not yet, not until you're ready, but I'm asking you to let me claim you, officially, so no one can ever question who you belong to. Aurelian stared at the ring. You don't have to answer now, Dominic added quickly, if you need time. Yes. Dominic blinked, yes. Aurelian nodded, his voice was stronger this time. Yes, I want to be chosen. Dominic slipped the ring onto Aurelian's finger, it fit perfectly. Then he kissed him. Not desperate, not frantic. Gentle, sure. A promise kept. Weeks turned into months. Aurelian's voice grew stronger. He started physical therapy to rebuild his stamina, started attending meetings with Dominic not as decoration, but as someone who had a say in decisions that affected him. The world adjusted. People whispered, but they didn't mock. They respected. Because Dominic Kael didn't keep weaknesses. He kept people who mattered. One night, Aurelian stood at the window of their shared room and looked out at the city. Dominic came up behind him and wrapped his arms around Aurelian's waist. What are you thinking? Dominic asked. Aurelian leaned back against him. That I used to think silence was the only way to survive. And now? Aurelian turned in Dominic's arms and looked up at him. Now I know speaking up is how you live. Dominic smiled. You're stronger than you think. I learned from the best. They stood there in comfortable silence, the city glowing beneath them. For the first time in his life, Aurelian wasn't afraid of tomorrow. Because he wasn't facing it alone. He had someone who chose him. Not because he was valuable, but because he was worth choosing. And that made all the difference. Thank you so much for watching this story unfold. If you enjoyed this journey of courage, survival, and love, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next powerful story. We bring you tales